Murtuza ji.
Yes.
Hiral bhai, I have to speak first. Then
Okay,
Murtuza ji.
we are online.
Yeah.
Sir, please.
Good evening, friends. Today we have with us. Good evening,
Start.
friends. Today we have with us our company secretary president, Institute of Company Secretaries President, Mr. Ashish Garg as a chief guest, and Mr. Ranjit Pandey as a keynote speaker. To introduce and make his opening remarks, we have with us Mr. Murtuza Kachwala, the Secretary WRC of ICAI. So I request Mr. Murtuza Sahib to take it over and start the session, please.
Thank you, Manoj ji. At the outset, let me thank Manoj Sonawala ji for coining such a good event. I think there is disturbance from someone. Everyone, I would request everyone to put on mute, please.
Yeah.
So, let me thank Manoj for organizing this 4-day panel discussion. And 29, 38 were excellent, and today with so many towering personality, I'm sure today's day is also going to be a treat for the participants. So protecting directors from legal liability for involuntary financial default and a required change in insolvency and bankruptcy code, subject for today. And with this time where a lot of organizations would be under stress and there could be a lot of challenges which organizations may face, I'm sure a lot more cases will come up and a really interesting subject. And we have with us chief guest CS Ashish Garg, President of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, past President CS Ranjit Pandey, past President of ICSI. For the today's session, the moderator is Mr. Sharad Abhyankar, partner with Khaitan and Company. And then we have 4 expert panelists: CA Pramod Jain, IP consultant; Mr. Vyapak Desai, partner Nishchit Desai and Associate; Dr. Neeti Shikha, head insolvency bankruptcy IICA; and Mr. Dushyant Dave, founding director Decode Revolve International. So let me start by introducing each one of you briefly. I am given to understand the biodata has already been shared, so I'll keep it very, very brief and try to complete one by one. Even before I get to the introduction, let me also thank CA Hiral Shah for all the help and support in providing the network and maintaining the technical background support for us. So let me get to the first introduction. CS Ashish Garg, President ICSI, a fellow member of ICAI, postgraduate of Economics MA, Commerce MCom, and graduate of Law from Vikram University, Ujjain. During his tenure as Vice President, he has been on various committees of ICSI. He was also nominated by ICSI as a member at the Cost Accounting Standard Board of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. A nominated director on the board of ICSI Institute of Insolvency Professional. He has also chaired several in-house committees of the ICAI, including Placement Committee, PMQ Committee, and Direct Tax Code Committee. So welcome, CS Ashish Garg. Then let me
Thank you so much.
Yes. Let me move on to the second introduction. Just taking a little time to search through the profiles, please. Ranjit Pandey. Okay. So, CS Ranjit Pandey, a fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries and a law graduate from Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. 17 years experience in the field of corporate and commercial law. He is also an insolvency professional. Ranjit Pandey is currently Vice President of Corporate Secretaries International Association Limited. He also served as the President of Institute for the year 2019, the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. He comes with rich knowledge and experience of financial market. CS Ranjit Pandey was also an ex officio member of the Primary Market Advisory Committee of SEBI. He is also served member of the Working Committee of Ministry of Corporate Affairs for streamlining working under the Companies Act 2013. And he has been on multiple committees. So let me also welcome CS Ranjit Pandey. Ranjit ji, welcome to you. Let me then move on to first introduce the moderator for today, and then I'll go on to all the expert panelists. So Sharad Abhyankar, partner with Khaitan and Company, Mumbai. More than 30 years of experience, Sharad specializes in corporate law, securities law, antitrust laws, telecom regulations, constitutional litigation, and international commercial arbitration. He advises Indian and international clients on strategic M&As, private equity investments and exit, capital market transactions, financing transactions, domestic cross-border, etc. Sharad has led preparation of compliance manual on Indian federal, state and provincial laws for Indian subsidiaries of multinational corporations. He is also involved in facilitating different government agencies in framing policies and regulations. He is an independent director on a few listed and unlisted Indian companies. Sharad is a member of the advisory committee and drafting committee of the NSC Center for Excellence in Corporate Governance. Sharad has authored several articles on a variety of legal topics. Welcome, Sharad. And you got a tough task of moderating this esteemed panel today. Let me then start with introduction of all the four expert panelists. Let me first go to Mr. Pramod Jain, independent director, chartered accountant, business valuation professional, insolvency professional, author and business coach. The heading itself covers everything. Mr. Pramod Jain has corporate executive with over 3 decades. He is practicing chartered accountant, insolvency and business valuation professional. He has delivered series of trainings and workshops in more than 50 locations across 5 continents in so many countries. He has 16 courses to his credit, which includes MBA, Chartered Financial Analysis, Cost and Management Accounting, etc. He is authored 2 books, Finance for Value Creation and You Are Born Winner. So welcome, Mr. Pramod Jain, to the esteemed panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Murtuzaji.
Yes. Then let me go on to introduce Dr. Neeti Shikha, is head Center of Insolvency Bankruptcy, Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. She has held academic positions at various law and business schools in India and in Singapore, including Stansfield College, Singapore. She serves on advisory board for India's leading policy think tank, Center for Civil Society, New Delhi. Dr. Shikha is author of leading books on corporate governance in India and has published widely in Indian and international academic journals. Dr. Shikha holds a PhD from National Law University, Jodhpur, and master's degree from University College London, UK. So welcome Dr. Neeti Shikha to the esteemed panel.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Let me then move on to the other 2 panelists. Just give me 1 minute. Yes. Dushyant Dave is the founding director of Decode Resolvency International Private Limited, which is an insolvency professional entity duly registered with IBBI. Mr. Dave is an investment banker and has been engaged in turnaround consulting across the sector of industry. And his experience in insolvency includes resolution, liquidation, turnaround, operations management. Experience includes investment banking, M&A, private equity, cost reduction, corporate affairs. He is also managing committee member of IMC, Chamber of Commerce, and co-chairs his banking and finance committee. So welcome Mr. Dushyant to the esteemed panel. Just 1 minute, sorry. The last expert on the panel today, Vyapak Desai, heads the International Dispute Resolution and Investigation Practice at the multi-skilled research and strategy-driven international law firm Nishit Desai Associate. A senior attorney with the firm, Vyapak specializes in bringing in the highest level of analytic arrangements in cross-border complex disputes. Vyapak's vast experience in legislation includes representing clients as counsel in the host of complex cases. Vyapak is a co-chair counsel of MCIA, director of CIARB India branch, member of ICC India Group, member of IB and IPA. He is listed on the panel of arbitrators and he's also authored books. So welcome Vyapak to this panel. With that interesting subject, and I hand over now again back to Manoj ji. Manoj, to you please. you can take it over from here.
Thank you, Murtuza ji, for your brief introduction and quick opening remarks and your brief introduction. Thank you very much. Now, may I request today's moderator, Mr. Saratbhai Abhyankar, to take over and start the session. No, sorry, I'm sorry. I have to request Mr. Ranjit Pandey, keynote speaker, to have his views first, and thereafter, Mr. Our chief guest, Mr. Ashish Garg, CS Ashish Garg, sir. So over to Mr. Ranjit Pandey, please. पांडे जी आपका ये म्यूट है।
मनोज जी
हाँ जी
आ रही है आवाज?
हाँ जी अभी आ रही है।
I think before me, I think president was supposed to speak. So
I leave it to you, sir.
So
sorry,
before me, I think president has to speak.
Okay, Ashish bhai, please.
It's a one and same thing. He was my president when I was vice president, so it's the same and one thing. But anyways, good evening, friends. At the outset, I would like to congratulate the Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry and WIRC of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and Manoyog GRC Advisors for initiating this unique venture, the online fresh site chat series. Friends, actually Manoj ji has requested me to take the session, but friends, I'm not an expert in IBC, and I have requested him to please have an expert who can throw a proper light on this subject. And my president Ranjit Pandey is an expert in this IBC, and so for the benefits of all the members, I have requested him that please come and join and take the session. But friends, I'll just throw some light on my experience on directors and IBC, because I was also having interaction during this different committee meetings. The moment the word director comes to our mind, all we can see in a person well suited up, sitting in a swanky office. More often than not, we would imagine him surrounded by a few files and giving out orders. But to be true, do we sit and ponder what the real role of a director is? What are his responsibilities? What are his duties? What are the expectations that he has from himself and others have from him? And no, I'm not talking about the legal definitions for a moment, for the law also stands for the ongoing precedence and not the other way around. Charles Keating, an American lawyer, once said, which I quote here, I believe the primary role of a director is to create an atmosphere where his company can be created. Now that to me is a pretty big statement. Rather, it includes each and everything, every aspect, every stakeholder of the company, for it is to them who truly are the company. One more technical note, the director can be rightly called the strategist who run a company. There is no decision of a company that is not overseen or taken up by the directors of the company. It is therefore only natural that these directors are integral to the everyday functioning of the company, being responsible for its management. And it is due that all these reasons and factors that they owe fiduciary duties towards the company and are accountable to all the stakeholders. The duties which we all know, it's common, well recognized and defined in various law, including Companies Act, SEBI law and different laws. But IBC has also introduced specific duties that are owed by director towards the creditors of their company in the time of financial distress. Different sections have defined. Nitiji is there, who is expert in this field. So section 66 of the code specifically define the different duties and responsibilities it imposes on the exercise of due diligence. It imposes a duty upon the director to act in the best interest of such creditors, regardless of whether they are voluntary or involuntary creditors. Thus, the decision taken by the directors on behalf of the company significantly impact the outcome of the insolvency process when the company or its creditors formally commence it. Directors are also responsible for action taken up to 1 year the proceedings of commencement of insolvency proceedings. However, additional due diligence it has to be done by the directors during the period preceding the initiation of insolvency, the lack of which may impose certain liabilities on him. Friends, now we are seeing in this difficult time of COVID, the IBC has been suspended for a particular time period. But believe me, when this lockdown will open, we may expect more and more companies in this IBC. Today, only we had a webinar where Justice Sikri, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, Supreme Court Justice, the NCLT member and NCLT member, when we were discussing, he has also emphasized that this IBC may explode to the large extent. But friends, some tips, some steps which can ensure the director's liability, which do not attract the legal liability, they should take care. In my opinion, first, they should exercise a proper due diligence to protect the interests of the creditors, to take the advice of the professionals such as companies accountants, chartered accountants, cost accountants, to valuer, to verify current solvency and cash flow to find out solvency can be avoided or not. Consult lawyers, legal fraternities, company secretaries to find out inappropriate or unlawful proposed transactions, if any. Seek advice of the insolvency professional, which is playing the key role in this IBC, to assess new and potential strategies for recoveries. And last but not least, to protect themselves, directors should also attend meetings and ensure that there are detailed minutes of the meeting. Raise your concern with other board members and have them minuted. And lastly, keep the company's position under regular review, and timely advice of the insolvency experts need to be sought. Friends, I hope that this online series shall prove to be useful and informative, not only to the directors, but also other stakeholders, professionals involved in the insolvency process, about what to demand and expect from the directors of the company. With this note, I thank you so much for inviting me and share my views. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashish ji. Thank you very much. Now, without taking much time, I'm moving to Mr. C.S. Ranjit Pandey for his keynote speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj ji, Bombay Chamber of Commerce, and all other panelists present here, and all organizers and support team, everyone, for organizing this webinar. I must compliment the Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry and all other organizers who are taking, say, a lot of pain to organize these kind of webinars in a difficult time. We at ICSI are also trying to organize so many webinars, and different kind of concept has been introduced by the president, that some motivational webinars should also come, some subject specific, some life experts should also come, so that health related issues can be taken up. So a lot of good things are happening, and I must say that India has become digital, but real digitalization we are using now. And in fact, everything is accessed through home, and world is becoming, say, on the desktop, and desktop is becoming the world. So friends, thank you very much for this webinar series. First of all, let me share my thoughts about the today's topic. Yes, this topic is very important, and in fact, directors' liability need to be discussed today in the context that a lot of bad assets are going to be created in during the lockdown, and I don't see the, say, I can say that flood of say new cases may come after this particular lockdown is lifted, because so many companies will be facing the difficulty. And here comes the concept of non-voluntary, because I don't have any, say, control over this kind of pandemic. I don't have the control over the lockdown. I wanted to run my company. I wanted to, say, do best to the, say, to serve the my creditors, but despite that I am not able to do. And if I am not able to do, then under the existing circumstances, under the existing provision where section 66 is there, and then 35A new section which has been introduced, So there are provision, but those provisions are not giving, say, very clear-cut immunity to the directors concerned in case of voluntary, involuntary defaults. Friends, rise of non-performing assets and credit repayment is going to rise in the country, and there is a onerous responsibility. I agree to this fact that directors must be diligent, prudent, and aware of the decision making, what decision company is taking, and whether it is the interest of the company or not. Yes, section 66 of the code identified the twilight zone as the starting point of the period from the time to when the director, and I can quote the section, that knew or ought to have known that there was a reasonable prospect of avoiding the commencement of corporate insolvency resolution. So things are very clear that if he knew and ought to have known that yes, some kind of say liquidity crunch is coming into the company, and I may not be able to serve my creditor, and if I am not able to serve my creditor, then definitely insolvency is around the corner. This provision definitely recognizes a specific duty of the directors towards the corporate debtor, that if you are on the verge of insolvency, then in the best interest of the such creditors, regardless of whether they are voluntary or involuntary, you should perform your duty and you should be able to try to avoid the insolvency. That is fine. Uh, but during the CIRP process also, some, although boards are suspended, but they have the additional responsibility to ensure that affairs of the company are in order and property is not decepted or exploited to the prejudice to the creditors. Perfect. These kind of things are there, and in fact, the adjudicating authority, National Company Law Tribunal, by order, can always make the director liable for such contribution to the assets of the corporate debtor as may deem fit. So this provision is also there, that if it is identified that director was careless, director was not perform his duty diligently, then tribunal or adjudicating authority has the power to say impose certain say contribution on the part of the directors to do. So friends, although at present there is no not exist a specific requirement on the director, so this topic is very apt topic where we can discuss the way forward, that how directors, particularly in case of say involuntary default, how they should be coming out or how their liability should be restricted. So directors are automatically placed into the company or formal insolvency process at the point where which they become aware that the company cash flow are negative. So code suspends the power of the board. Code gives say no authority to that director to run the company. And since their directors are not empowered to act beyond this period, they should not be held liable for that particular period. Of course, they should be told that you need to support the insolvency professional to run the company in the best interest of the creditor and to serve the creditor. Having said so, I will say that what could be the way forward. In fact, I will just first section 32A, which has been introduced by ordinance dated 28 December 2009. This section provides immunity to the corporate debtor before and it's except from the prosecution for the offences committed before the commencement of CIRP. Fine. The immunity is given only to the corporate debtor, not to the director, individual director concerned, or designated partner of LLP who is being processed for the personal vicarious liability. So this particular thing has been given in the new section which has been introduced through the ordinance. What could be the way forward and what could be the recommendation? I can share my views. It may be possible that it can be deliberated further and fine tuned. First is that companies at IBC both provides duty to the directors need to fulfill in the functioning of the of a company both before or after the insolvency. However, no provision is there for the relief that should be bestowed on the director of the company in case where there is a involuntary financial default. So say for example, this kind of pandemic is happening and director has no control over the say assets and affair of the company, and if there is no control If he is not able to run the company, then how he will be able to serve the debtor? Of course, RBI has provided some kind of moratorium, but interest liability is still continuing. And if interest liability is still continuing, that means the company which is already stressed, they may get further stressed, and after the lockdown is over, they may face difficulty. And this kind of say default may be involuntary default on the part of director. So some kind of respite should be given to the director. Second point is, general presumption under section 62 is in favor of director in case of some become questionable, and the director need to ensure the evidence, the reasonable due diligence has been exercised by them to minimizing the potential loss and lack of feasibility on the commencement of corporate insolvency process. So friends, here also I think burden of proof lies on the director concerned, that they need to prove that they were diligent, they have the proper document which provides them provides the sufficient evidence to prove that they were diligent, and whatever has happened not because of their fault. Third point is that 32A, which we have just discussed and I have just quoted right now. Here also, I think corporate debtor has been given some kind of respite. Now, for involuntary, as some carve out should be given, of course, for the involuntary default on the part of director. So that can also be given, of course, subject to certain conditions, or maybe some some of the conditions should be elaborated through the proviso or some other provisions or explanation, that director need to perform this basic duty, and if despite performing this kind of duty, if certain things happen, then this kind of immunity which is extended to the corporate debtor may be extended to the director also. Lastly, legal liability to be excused during the period of moratorium for the maximum cooperation with the so only thing is that since I am not out of the company and it has gone to the CIRP, and if it has gone to the CIRP, I should be excused during that particular period. My liability should be limited towards the maximum cooperation providing to the corporate debtor, and nothing beyond that. If I am failing in my duty to cooperate, or if I am not able to cooperate, and if I am acting in prejudice to the creditor and the corporate debtor, then definitely I should be punished, otherwise not. To sum up, these 4-5 things I would say that should be discussed, deliberated, and after due discussion and deliberations, ministry or maybe insolvency law committee should discuss this. After discussion, concept paper may be floated, and that concept paper may may be open for the public comment also, so that everybody should participate, and legislation may be amended, or maybe new provisions can be introduced. So this is what my opening comments or opening remarks or address from my side, whatever I can foresee and I can think as a insolvency professional. Rest panelists are expert, and they are better equipped than me, and they can throw more light on the subject. Over to you, Manojji. Thank you so much for inviting me here in the panel, and thanks for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pandeji. Thank you very much for your insights and your suggestions that directors have to be, there is no immunity as such directly given to directors, and they have onerous responsibilities. So they have to be, during the twilight zone, they have to be really cautious about everything. And your suggestion of concept paper also is really very valid, and we will work on that through either Bombay Chamber or other chambers, and we will work on that. Thank you very much, Pandeji, for your insights. Thank you, Ashish ji, for your also as a director, as a visionary. You have suggested that they have to be integral to the functions of companies, and they have a fiduciary duties. And as visionary and strategists, they have to work not only towards the financial liabilities but overall well-being of all the stakeholders. Thank you, Ashish ji, for your these kind words. May I now request Mr. Sharad Abhyankar ji, moderator for today's session, to carry on with his role, please. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you, Manoj. Thank you, Ashish ji and Pandey ji. Your insights were indeed very helpful to begin the discussion. So today's topic being protecting directors from legal liability. Maybe Vyapak, can I ask you to very briefly outline what are the we all know duties and risks and issues that float around the director position. What are the legal liabilities? What are the directors really worried about when we talk about legal liabilities?
Sure. I think some portion Ashish and Ranjit did mention about the liabilities. They also mentioned some of the provisions which give moratorium or at least some suspension to those liabilities in specific situations. But let me put this little more simply, right? Uh, I would put the section of liability in possibly three different portions for our discussions. One is liabilities under the Companies Act itself, right? So that is straight and a clear liability which comes in. I would also include IBC as part of this uh, part because to some extent they go hand in hand, particularly in situations where the insolvency is commenced. The second kind of liabilities I look at it is the vicarious liability provisions which come under various different statutes. And these statutes, which I generally, for an example, let's say Negotiable Instrument Act, we have always seen how section 138 to 141 creates a vicarious liability. Sections under the SEBI Act, PMLA, which is nowadays the most effective and possibly most rampant in terms of its usage, Income Tax Act, Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Bonus Act. Typically, you have seen a vicarious liability provisions where offenses of by the companies are also, percolated down to directors as part of vicarious liability, but with a clear safe harbor provision, which typically would say that so long as the onus of proof, of course, is on director, but so long as the director proves that a contravention took place without his or her knowledge, or that he or she has exercised all due diligence to prevent such contravention, then those liabilities would not come to the director. So that is second category of liabilities. The third category of liabilities are more specific in certain statutes. For example, under Factories Act, where occupier or otherwise or a specific person is designated, or even under Shops and Establishment Act, those specific liabilities come in. So we have to look at these liabilities in three different categories, and how directors can get caught under either, as we have seen so many companies who may have been facing enforcement directorate show cause notices. Suddenly, if PMLA trickles in, and the directors are put to a lot of stress around the investigation and can be vicariously held liable. So that is one part of it. So far as Companies Act is concerned, right, which is the primary discussion for today's purpose, I think everything under the Companies Act, particularly 2013, I think is a clear reflection of what happened in Satyam. Before that, there was very little jurisprudence, or at least the legislation was not up to the mark as to what happens to director liabilities. And what happened with Satyam Saga, I think 2013 was amended to address some of those issues which the independent or the nominee directors or the non-executive directors faced. And I think what 2013 brings in is a clear distinction, at least in terms of liability, where while whole-time director and director both are liable for the contraventions, but at least there is a safe harbor for the non-executive and independent directors, similar to the provisions which we spoke, that at least they can show that it was without their knowledge, or they took enough precautions or due diligence to avoid such contravention. So I think all in all, in my view, so far as the executive directors are concerned, I think it is very difficult to take away the vicarious liability under the provisions, as Ranjit was also mentioning today, that whichever way you look at, directors getting off the hook is always difficult, because we always treat in some form still, corporate liability percolating down to directors, even without mens rea, or to to
Yes.
taking an example that the proof is without the mens rea. So I think that is the problem which at least the executive directors or promoter directors today face. And as we go along, I think we can also discuss some of the examples which we have already seen under COVID-19 situation, where defaults were up during the moratorium which RBI had released, and still, there are different views taken by Delhi High Court and Bombay High Court. But I will leave it to leave it that discussion to as we go forward in the context of other questions. Thanks, Sharad. You are on mute, Sharad. So.
So sorry. Thank you very much, Vaibhav. You laid down the basic framework perfectly. Now, looking at this, the sort of a IBC being suspended for a limited period. What could be the effect of this suspension on really companies who are obviously every company is under stress, and there may be issues which are already pending before IBC. So no new cases may be filed, but what is the effect on the companies which are already in before IBC and pending resolution? So, Nidhi madam, can you throw some light on directors, how they should be performing in situations where they are already before IBC, and what is the effect of the suspension? Will it have any adverse or favorable impact on their duties, liabilities, and things like that?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Mr. Abhyankar. See, as I see that, directors' duties, Mr. Desai has really put the premise, put the platform for discussion. So for the cases that was already under the CIP process, reached a resolution, I don't see that it'll have any effect on the suspension of avoidable transaction or wrongful transaction will have any effect on the directors there. But I think for those companies which may be rethinking to realign its business, to find a solution to restructure its business, I think there's a lot of concern the directors may have there. And I say so because if you see directors, even if you suspend certain liability that may arise from wrongful transaction, I will not celebrate this, because how many successful litigations have happened around around fraudulent transactions. The burden of proof is so high that suspension of fraudulent transaction really does not take the onus out of them. Having said that, for the wrongful transaction, it does give them certain respite where they can take decisions without fearing liability. Now, having said that, we miss the fact that liability of director does not arise under IBC alone. IBC does not supplant director's duties; it only supplements it, right? So you have the whole gamut of fiduciary duties under various acts. Even if there was no duty, there's still a duty on directors under common law, which Supreme Court, time and again have recognized it, right? So I think directors right now are under a lot of pressure, because even if you suspend it for a while, you let them believe that they can make bold decisions to save companies. At the hindsight, they always are worried about it. In fact, in the afternoon today, we had a webinar. My center did a webinar with one practitioner, Ian Mann from Hong Kong. And he was sharing his experience that in past 2 weeks, there's so many directors have reached out to him to ask, should they continue on the board. So that is the kind of concern directors have. So I think we are in interesting times, and directors are, I think it's the most difficult time for directors on board. I think one thing that safeguards director, which works like double whammy for directors, is Section 166 of Companies Act. And why I say so is because 166 says directors have to take care, give regard to shareholders and stakeholders. Now, interestingly, the Indian law does not give any guidance to directors as to who should they give preference over whom, right? So, unlike the English jurisprudence, where 2006 UK Act clearly states that when the company is a going concern, your focus should be shareholders, and when company enter the twilight zone, the focus should be creditors. Now, interestingly, 166 does not really spell that intention of legislation out, right? So, and looking at the kind of government guidelines that is coming, where government is requesting companies to give regard to stakeholders, I feel that if directors have acted in a best interest of stakeholders, it may somehow sort of act like a shield for them under 166. So this is my limited submission to your question. If anybody would like to add to what I have suggested, what I have submitted right now.
Yeah, thank you, madam. That's very insightful. The Dushanji, there is no typical definition or interpretation on involuntary defaults, and how does that change really the complexion of the director's liabilities, because they are anyway required to assess the risk, and something as drastic as COVID-19. Obviously, this has not happened overnight. So, in terms of starting say from February, when at least the ministry said that beware, this can be treated even as a force measure. Would the conduct of directors post such declarations or post awareness that this is reaching colossal proportions, would the conduct of directors be under focus from that point onwards? Sorry, Dushan bhai, you are on mute.
I think sir is
So you're
Dushan bhai, you are still on mute.
Yeah. Yes, now it's correct. Yeah.
No, it's not correct now also.
No. Now still not.
Not audible.
Organizer
Yeah,
is.
Now it's okay.
It was unmuted by the organizer. All right. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be a part of this panel, and thank you, Bombay Chamber of Commerce, to put up this very interesting topic. Definitely, directors are heading for a lot of action from all the stakeholders in the times to come. Shraji, your question is that what will happen, whether any conduct during this period of director will be at with a magnifying glass or not. What will happen now is that companies will default to the various stakeholders. First, they'll be defaulting to their suppliers for not making a timely payment. They'll be defaulting to their workers and workmen for not making a timely payment of the wages. So the default will happen at a corporate level for want of liquidity. But in case if the default has happened by not for the want of liquidity, but by you are taking a shelter of the COVID-19, then surely the conduct of the directors will be to the questionable thing. But as long as it is a liquidity issue, then I do not see that directors personally will be liable as much as the corporate is liable under various sections. Now, let us say, since I am of insolvency practice, I'll talk more about the IBC. What will happen immediately is that the moment there is a default, somebody will try to take company to the CIRP. The operational creditors have used this IBC very random, very blatantly, and they've recovered the money like anything. But this probably here is what the intervention of the legislature has to be done. The legislature has to intervene now to, as suspension is already done for 6 months. But I have a feeling that I think section 7 and 9 will have to go beyond, right up to the end of the financial year, where the pains of this liquidity will keep on happening. Even after that, the legislature will have to come into change the laws and the provisions, and that's where the Bombay Chamber can take an initiative to do that. Is that if this kind of a change in the legislature doesn't happen, you'll have a plethora of legal cases only. And I think that was not the objective of the court. Objective of the IBC code was to maximize the utilization of resources, do the resolutions, etc., and not as a punitive measures on something. Now, COVID-19 situation is just equivalent to the Great Depression of which happened nearly 100 years back, 90 years back, and now you are going to have that kind of measures to take place into the IBC, Companies Act, or whichever act which is going to bind the company. We are not talking about the willful defaulters. Willful defaulters can't just get away by taking a pretext or under shelter of the COVID-19 and gather time there. But I think that's what I think government is also contemplating. So that will only be able to protect it. Otherwise, there is no way in which directors, personally speaking, the company, the promoter directors or the independent directors. See, independent directors will not be personally liable even in the IBC. IBC, what happens is that when the CRP starts, promoters are suspended, the board of directors is suspended, the RP takes over and runs the company. And but I think that is again was not the objective of the court, that in this current situation you punish a promoter or for that matter the related parties of the promoter who have invested in good faith in those companies to lose the company because of the COVID-19 situation, because that would create very serious issues. It will also create a lot of employment issues. So I personally feel that if whatever was happening earlier, that will continue to happen to bind the directors for their conduct or their action. But in case if there is a change in the legislature, that because of the COVID-19 situations, some of the creditors just cannot take the company to CIRP, that's where I think the director's liability will be protected. They will be taken care of.
Pramod has joined. I didn't see him.
Yeah, I'm there, right there.
You shouldn't switch on the video. That
no, I can't switch it. I tried to, but there's some problem. So, but I'm
okay.
there.
Yeah, I'll try to connect. I'll try to connect him. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Pramod, there is a little bit of a ticklish issue when we look at IBC. It gives overwhelming control to the financial creditors, and really when we are looking to start up all engines together, really there is a lot of interdependence of businesses, and it is really your employees, suppliers, customers, everybody is working towards starting up this engine. And so in this situation, even if there is a stress or if there is a default, should operational creditors be given some kind of a higher protection than what is currently being offered by IBC, because they are virtually at a in the worst situation, they have a liquidation value left to them. So in the current situation where actually to run your operations, these are the persons who are helping you to keep the business going, although they will they may be required to offer you best of the discounts. Should operational creditors really be looked at more carefully in these situations?
Yeah, thank you, Sharad Bhai. This is, I think, very useful question. Now, before I respond to this question, I would like to mention here that personally, I am not as pessimistic about the whole situation as some people are believing it to be. See, in my view, it would be incorrect to think that there is going to be a recession. Remember, everything is intact. The factories are intact, people are intact, machineries are intact, production capacity is intact, even demand is also there. So it is not that there is a tsunami or there is an earthquake or there is a massive number of people who have died and therefore the demand has come down. So number one, I'm extremely optimistic about the situation, and in my view, in my personal view, as soon as I think within 15 days time, once the lockdown is lifted and things are normal on the COVID front in this country, I think economy of this country will start rolling back again. And in my view, it would not take more than 2 months to come back to the same pace as it was, assuming that COVID is under control. So therefore, in my view, the picture is not going to be as bad as people are thinking to be. Now, number two, coming back to your question about as to whether the operational creditor should be given some better handle. Now, my answer would be number one, what Dushyant Bhai has said, I think is very right. It is really unfortunate that the whole objective, whole purpose of IBC has been completely sidelined. IBC was brought into existence as a law not to be used as a recovery tool by the operational creditor. Unfortunately, that is what has happened. This law has been so extensively used only for the purpose of recovery. Now, that is not the objective. Objective of the IBC is to resolve the insolvency. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, most of the stakeholders who are there as part of the insolvency process have forgotten the basic objective. तो insolvency को resolution तो बाद में रह गया, तो it is now focusing on the recovery. Now, giving a better handle to the operational creditor, we have to look at it this way. ये जो problem है शरद भाई, this is a very unique problem. It is not a problem of one person. It is not a problem of one state. It is not a problem of one industry, one product or one company. This is the problem of the entire country. And this problem has to be resolved and solved by all the stakeholders coming together, applying their mind together, making sacrifices to their capacity, and get on with it and move on actually. So the question of giving the better handle to the operational creditor, अब देखो ये बात तो सही है कि COC has got a dominating role, and in my personal view, that dominating role given to the COC is unfair. And why it is unfair? Unfortunately, the insolvency professional, the resolution professional was to be the CEO of a company which has gone to a NCLT. But de facto, what is happening is the resolution professional is heavily dependent on the approval from the COC, which in turn is getting the whole process of resolution delayed beyond any number of days that you can think. तो मुझे नहीं लगता है कि ऑपरेशनल क्रेडिटर को अलग से कुछ हैंडल देने की जरूरत है. मुझे लगता है कि सारे स्टेक होल्डर्स ने इस चीज को समझना होगा कि this is not a problem of one person, this is a problem of everybody, and everybody has to fight it together, and then only we can get out of it actually. So this is what is my view, Sharad Bhai, on this question of yours.
Yeah, thank you. Niti madam, you had some thoughts, and do we have some international experience on how other countries are looking at this situation of even suspending the protection of IBC, or what are the are there comparables in other jurisdictions?
So thank you for your question, sir. Let me first reflect on what the previous panelist said. Sir has rightly, brought out some key, key issues in IBC. He rightly says that IBC is not a recovery mechanism, and then he discusses how FCs, financial creditors, have more say. Now, let me just answer that question, because then that really puts into context what I'm going to say next, which answers the question that you have put to me. Sir, we have to understand that operational creditors, giving them more power under IBC, even in this situation like this, despite of the fact that they have helping the company remain a going concern in this stressful time, is not a solution. It's not even legally a solution under Companies Act. And let me share you why. You know, this is a long-standing jurisprudence of company law across the globe that secured creditors' rights will be secured and preferred over unsecured creditors. Now, this was, I think it was a magic that IBC did in initial days, where it tried to put the OCs at equal pedestal for whatever good or bad reason. So I'll not go into that, but you know, it's a standing jurisprudence that, you know, OCs preference in payments, OCs rights, you know, it has to be subservient to FCs. So within the realm of, you know, IBC or companies law, we cannot find a solution to even help OCs, however sympathetic we feel towards them, that they're helping the company in these difficult times. Now, however, there could be a solution under contract law. For the reason, you know, if in difficult times like this, there can be post-ante discussion on their rights and liabilities, which means, you know, the answer could be when stakeholders like financial creditors, you know, operational creditors, they all could come to a table and discuss and renegotiate their rights in a contract, and that contract can have a binding effect on all the stakeholders. So just my brief submission to the previous question is, you know, probably we should explore the answers through a contract post on negotiation instead of looking for tweaking the law. Because, you know, once you have a consensus ad idem, parties agrees to make their rights subservient. If banks realize that, you know, it is better to make my right for a limited time, you know, to forego my rights to ask for interest, and probably give some sort of pie to OCs, and it helps me in the longer run, then, you know, nothing will stop them. Under law, they can't do it. Under Companies Act, they'll not be able to do it, but under contract, you know, it'll be binding. So that's my one submission. Now, looking into how international community, international regimes have answered, sir, UK has, you know, it has brought various changes regarding insolvency regime. You know, it has put a moratorium on administratorship. But however, it does not say that, you know, insolvency cases cannot be brought in. Also, because UK has, you know, this administratorship laws are very profound, and 6 months moratorium is given there. Then they have suspended directors' liability for wrongful trading and fraudulent trading. Australia also has echoed the same, you know, the same feelings. In Hong Kong, however, there is no suspension of wrongful trading, fraudulent trading, but they have put sort of moratorium on the new cases that comes under administratorship. Now, this is what most of the countries have, you know, approach that countries have taken, which I think was also one of the motivation for the Indian regulators to take a similar stance. Personally, I do not agree with it, though we can celebrate that it has helped us file the epidemic, you know, the pandemic situation that we are in. And if you allow me, towards the end, I can tell you my reservations regarding suspension, you know, of insolvency cases. So, but I mean, again, it's my personal view. So this is how the international community has answered. However, we must not forget one thing, sir, that internationally, you know, their insolvency laws are not one-stop solution. Now, in IBC, we are looking for resolution, recovery, wealth maximization, everything under the same umbrella, right? Which is not the case in the Australian jurisdiction, which is not the case in England. So even there's a moratorium of administratorship in various countries, it does not bar the creditors or the corporate debtors to go through other, you know, to adopt other approaches, as in India, which IBC had become so profound in last 2 years that was seen as the solution for any restructuring. So yes, sir.
Can I add here?
Yeah.
I would like to,
what Niti has said. Niti, just one, you know, one point what I like to make here. You know, you're very right when you said that OC, the FC has got upper hand than OC in the jurisprudence. we need to understand the reason behind it, the logic behind it, as to why is that so? Why is that the lawmakers have thought it that way? Remember, in a company, what will happen? In a company, you will have 4, 5, 10 FCs, but in a company, you will have hundreds and thousands, sometimes the OCs. So, and what's the objective of the IBC? The objective of the IBC is to resolve the insolvency. If you have to resolve the insolvency, you have to have the faster decision-making process. And that is why the IBC has got a time frame in terms of number of days. So why the lawmakers have put the onus on the financial creditors and excluded the OCs for the simple reason, because if the OCs were to be put on the same platform as the financial creditor, the decision making would have been a big challenge. So, and unfortunately, COC, the financial creditor, should have understood it this, that just because I have a higher platform, it is not to be misused by me to suppress the operational creditor. On the contrary, I have a bigger responsibility. So I have to not only take care of myself, I have to take care of the operational creditors also. Ultimately, I have to ensure that the insolvency is resolved. And unfortunately, all the stakeholders in the whole process have never put a focus on that. Arey bhai, IBC is to push the resolution, and people are focusing more on litigation. And in my view, why the government has increased the threshold from 1 lakh to 1 crore, it is primarily for that reason, because the IBC was being used as a recovery mechanism. So the government realized yaar ki agar ye chalta rahega, तो NCLT will be overcrowded only with the cases of recovery and not of the insolvency resolution. So therefore, they have increased the threshold from 1 lakh to 1 crore. And for the same reason, they have increased, they have suspended section 7 and 9. If I will like to mention to all the esteemed panel member, this is the time that all of us need to sit together and think and promote and make it, educate everybody. IBC is to expedite the resolution of insolvency. The litigation and insolvency under IBC should have been the bare minimum. But today, what we see, maximum. So this is the Neeti, the answer to your question about as to why the FC has got a bigger upper hand than the OCA.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, sir.
Right.
I mean,
Kishan bhai, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, I would like to say two things about the international practice. About the US, I'm in touch with we have counterpart, we have an associate office in US actually. You'll be surprised to know that US has put such a large amount of financial package available to everyone. There is a mortal honor who is able to get a $10 million loan at a 1% interest. People are just not allowed to fail. Now, that's where the operational creditors don't come into picture. They don't take the companies to insolvency. Now, we cannot do that in India for the obvious reasons. We don't have so much money with us. So the second part, which we'll have to do, is that this law enforcement and the contract enforcement. As you know, most of the companies, we have come across the CIRP in the cases where the companies have become sick because of the dues from the government. A large amount of governments are not paid in time to the companies, and the companies had to go bust because they were not being able to pay to the operational creditors. So probably even as on today, there are a lot of arbitral awards which has gone in favor of the companies, but the government entities themselves have challenged it. And then as a result, those companies are not in a position to pay back to the operational creditors. So to protect the operational creditors, the whole cycle of the monetary system, it's just not the law that how do we protect under this law or that law, because behind everything there is a financial issue. Now again, I'm not talking about willful defaulters and kind of a thing, but we are talking about an economic system which is getting failed, which is happening because of the break in somewhere in the some cycle is broken. So these arbitral awards, which has been gone in favor of the companies, and for that government entities have gone to a challenge against it, there should be immediately, in a short timeline, they should be allowed to square off, so that the operational creditors are paid in time, so that they don't end up jeopardizing the interest of the secure financial creditors. This is what two submissions I wanted to make in terms of the comparing the international and the India. We have to be careful there. Yeah.
Sure. Can I come in very short, 30-second
Yes,
comment?
please come in.
Sure. So I think on the international side, I think we have discussed UK and US. I think the other very close jurisdiction that we have is Singapore. and I think we are missing, though everyone would say that Singapore is completely different from India in terms of its length and breadth, which I agree. But I think taking a cue from what they have done. So I think, first of all, my simple point is, whether it is Companies Act, whether it is IBC with or without COVID, I think India works on a principle that it is crime to fail. I think we need to first of all get rid of this theory that it is never a crime to fail so long as it is done in good faith. Uh, and therefore, I think if we have legislations, if we have in fact, there are theories and there are practical examples where people who have failed more have succeeded better. And therefore, to say that promoters should go out of the company on day one, and maybe that was done in a context of the 12 dirty dozen and all of that, and it was a legacy issue. But I think we need to revamp that thought process first before revamping the law, that it is not crime to fail. I think second point is Singapore, and Singapore has done something very, very, very unique. They have passed a consolidated new law. They have not tried to amend IBC in one sense and then use Epidemic Diseases Act and then use Disaster Act and this act and that act. What they have done is they have simply enacted a new law, which is called the Temporary Measures COVID-19 Act. And it is, by the name it suggests, it's a Temporary Measures Act. And they have actually laid down 3 or 4 basic fundamental issues there. One, they have addressed the issue of contract enforcement, which actually addresses any and every point that we were talking. What will happen to a spiral effect? One fails, therefore the other fails, and therefore the person who was to collect from that fails. Basically, A fails, B fails, C fails, D fails, everything is a spiral. And if you stop B to go against C, then D is getting geo prejudice because D had to collect from C. So I think by helping one, you are actually not helping the other. So what Singapore has done is they have actually put a temporary measure on contract enforcement. They have actually laid down some 15, 17, 20 categories of what kind of contracts in the situations of COVID, and they have clearly spelled out the priority sectors that they want to address to start with. Two, they have also, in the same act, obviously what India has done, increase the threshold for insolvency, like what we have done from 1 lakh to 1 crore. I think they have done from 10,000 to 100,000 Singapore dollars or something like that. Two, they have also increased the demand response to demand notices from 21 days to 6 months. So what they have tried to do is they have tried to give the flexibility and leeway across the board rather than address it to one. So I think from an Indian perspective, yes, we are pretty varied in our actions and we are pretty varied in terms of our expectations because everyone would have their different viewpoint. But what is required is, as I said, it's okay if someone fails, no problem, so long as things are done in good faith. I think everything related to director liabilities can be taken care of. And two, if you have a Temporary Measures Act as a central legislation applying across 5, 6, 7 categories of issues that the industry is facing, and we already have an example what Singapore has done, I think that can address, in my view, at least 70-80% of the problem, if not all. That is what something I wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think ultimately the government will have to step in. Germany has also provided a reasonably good model on moratorium on commercial payments and things like that. So one issue, looking at the suspended period of IBC, if you look at companies which are anyway under stress, and we are talking about director liabilities, how would the directors of companies which are anyway under tremendous stress and they are not really finding a reasonable financial support, their going concern issues are itself at risk, and IBC is suspended. So where do they go from there, and how do they demonstrate that they're still performing very well as director? Madam, you want to take that? Sorry, Dushyant bhai, please go ahead.
No, are you talking? Yeah, I think your question is probably about a company which is already into CRP at present. Is it right? What I'm saying is currently.
No, it would have approached CIRP because it was too stressful. So by itself, it would have gone into IBC, but it cannot because now there is a suspension of that provision.
So, so there are large number of cases at present. A large number of cases are going under CIRP, and the first thing is that the NCLT, there is already a provision. So there is an extension of the entire lockdown period to be counted as a exempted period of the CIRP. So the company will continue as it was going. The RP or the resolution professional who is in charge of the company will continue be in charge of the company. Company will remain closed during the lockdown period as all other companies are closed, and it will restart the company when the lockdown period is over. Somebody said that the world is not over, so as soon as the lockdown is done, for example, I am managing a company, a large steel company, which is in Chhattisgarh, which is a sort of a green-orange zone, and we are expected that this company will start from the next week. And this company starts from the next week, but then simultaneously the whole ecosystem also should start, the suppliers, the workers, etc. So that normal pain will be taken care of. But the moment it's all over, it will again go back for the inviting of the resolution plan from the investors. It will go through an EOI process. And the IBC and the NCLT has already given that exemption period. So none of that is going to affect that plan right now.
Right. I think we may be running out of time, but just a last question. There are already resolution plans in operation and under implementation. Now, clearly, there is no framework that these plans can be really amended. If at all, it could have been only through say a COC resolution. So, how do you see the stress getting on to those successful bidders who had a planning to implement the resolution plans, but their plans are now stunted by a sudden situation which is completely involuntary? So anybody, I mean, these are again situations where people have approved plans, NCLT has approved, and those plans are now under stress.
What I would say about this is, obviously, the changed situation will require a changed solution. So all the resolution plans which were already approved and will need to be re-looked at, because the numbers, the financials, the demand, everything would have undergone a change. So I'm sure all those successful bidders will have to look at their plans once again and revalidate it under the new scenario. And maybe they will have to resubmit it. Otherwise, with the same plan, if they go ahead with, it is quite possible they might feed some more roadblock, and which can really derail them from the resolution of the insolvency.
Thank you.
This is one of the most important question. What will happen is that we will be seeing more and more resolution applicants who will be backing out of the plans. And when a resolution applicant backs out and there is no resolution plan available, the natural, as per the law, the company gets into the liquidation. Now, this is the most serious thing which will have to, government will have to come out with the legislation to stop this. We will have to extend the CIRP period. We'll have to allow the applicant to back out, but then again, there should be another process by which you can invite the investors to get into it. Maybe if this one investor was unable to make his commitment, another investor should be able to do that. This is the most serious thing, because the objective of the court is not just to implement the law by the letter, but it should be by the spirit.
Right.
So you just can't just liquidate the company because the resolution plan is not there, so let the company be liquidated. Not the secure financial credit should be allowed to do that. Nobody should be allowed to do that for this particular COVID-19 period, where there is a there is a failure by the resolution applicant to submit to the plan. That's my submission. This is the most important. I would invite everybody to give their opinion on this, and this should be actually presented to the government in a right spirit.
So if you allow me, I'm an academic, so my answer may sound very theoretical, but just to substantiate that's not just theory, let me quote two cases. So it happened during World War II when Suez Canal was closed, and it's a very famous case, Suez Canal case. But court never held the contract to be frustrated. The court said, and I quote, it's not impossibility, but the mere contract becomes expensive does not lead contract to be frustrated. I'll quote another case which helps us find. So just to build on that, what has happened now that it may become commercially non-viable for the resolution applicant whose application is successful to go ahead with the plan. Now, are the courts or the legislature here to help these people out of a bad bargain because there was a material adversity in the market? Now, even in MAC clauses, when you enforce it, there are a lot of, MAC clauses does not render a contract frustrated. So to my limited submission would be, there should be an argument made to the government or whoever is here to decide that they should not be allowed to walk out. Now, second submission would be, and I will draw my reference from Mr. Desai, what he said. If you look at the COVID-19 Act in Singapore, most of the provisions there, like for example, the tenancy obligation, it only defers the right to collect, rentals. It does not exonerate a tenant from paying the rentals. So a deferment and obligation has occurred, but not, exoneration, which means maybe, NCLT or the lawmakers could say that it may be implemented after a certain time when the market reaches normalcy, but it should not be done away with in the light of whatever happened right now. Another case comes to my mind is City Land Property Trust. Now, this was a case where World War II was happening, and all the, there was the whole property market in London almost collapsed. So for some time, for limited time, the landlords, they decreased the amount of collection that they had to make from the tenants, so that there's a win-win situation for both the parties. Now, again, I go back to, parties can probably think through how much, cut each of them could take and let this, the resolution plan succeed. So I don't see that they should be given any leeway in walking out of the obligation. And in the end of the day, sir, you have to understand that, IBC is also a mechanism of business rescue. We should never make it, the whole effort of the legislation to, to work upon India making a good commercial destination will fail if any such socialistic, approach is adopted by giving non-effective commercial reality. So there's a hardship in the market, but hardship has to be taken, care in a bit more practical light and not through our, emotions.
I take your point, but I think my only submission is that if the resolution applicant fails for financial reasons, then let other resolution applicant come and do it. But let the company not be allowed to liquidate by the letter of the law. That's my point.
Yeah.
So you become ruthless. You forfeit the guarantee of the person who had applied. You forfeit his guarantee amount,
and then you
let
put
other.
That's
this.
Sure. So let me come in here because I think Niti did mention about the law, and I think the UK law that she was mentioning clearly, puts the difference between prevention or impossibility versus impracticality or something which is commercially not viable. So I think we need to make a difference between what is impossible slash prevented to hindrance versus commercial viability. So I think we cannot forget that aspect when we are looking at this law. Two, I think by and large, even the Indian courts, yes, there have been little difference of opinion depending upon the facts. But if I just summarize what has happened even during the COVID situation in virtual courts that India is running, I think in cases where people were trying to misuse the RBI circular on moratorium, where defaults were of January, and they were trying to say, okay, you cannot enforce the pledge or otherwise. I think courts have come heavily on them and clearly allowed. We have seen in ICICI case and other cases, unless the undertaking to pay was given, court clearly said that the right for pledge enforcement is all okay. While in Yes Bank case, Delhi High Court did agree on a technical ground that you may not call it NPA so long as the moratorium continues, but that was more of an interpretation of the clause. In case of Hyundai, the letter of credit was not allowed to get injuncted, and therefore it was not stopped. And therefore there are various cases that we have seen. Yes, in Halliburton, Vedanta, again, if you look at the facts of the case, you will be able to see why the bank guarantee was stopped to get encashed. Otherwise, the law is very clear that unless there is a fraudulent situation, that should not stop. So I think the facts were very heavy, and as we say in legal language, hard facts make bad law. So sometimes law is created and read based on hard facts. Otherwise, law actually doesn't change. But sometimes those facts do create a headline that, oh, bank guarantee was stopped. But that's not the law. Law is still what it was, and nothing has changed in spite of whatever force majeure cases. So I think not everything is lost here, as I think Pramod was also saying. Even directors, the corporates, everyone has that hope still alive. And I can only see that the way the government has acted and at least given a lot of moratorium and suspension on issues, I am sure some of these issues are not unsurmountable. I feel that can be done, particularly with this kind of discussions. If white papers are produced and presented, I am sure government will listen and react on it.
Thank you so much. I think all the directors will be definitely happy to see the situations where the government is listening, and I think institutions like BCCI can definitely motivate the government to act in the best interest of all the enterprises rather than directors looking at focus at their single enterprise. So I think it will be definitely a collective effort. I think directors need not be overly worried that, if that's really the message that all of us are really looking at. And that's what I think I heard from all the panelists, that it's a collective effort of the companies, all their stakeholders and the government. I think all of us will come together to ultimately come out of these difficult times. So thank you very much.
I will just like to Sharad bhai, I would just like to mention one thing, and it goes like this: rules are for people, people are not for rules. Rules are for people, people are not for rules. And fortunately, today there is a lot more awakening on the part of everybody. Everybody understands it. So nobody is going to go after कि भाई कानून में ऐसा लिखा है तो आपको तो ऐसा ही करना पड़ेगा. ऐसा नहीं होगा. Even the government is going to be very flexible. The example which somebody gave of US, what kind of facilities they are giving to the various. I'm sure once things settle down, even the Indian government would also be thinking in terms of what kind of packages can be given. And of course, it has to be as Niti was giving the example कि वो rent उन्होंने exonerate नहीं किया, exonerate करना भी नहीं है, deferment करो, गाड़ी को line पे आने दो, and once the economy is on track, recover everything, because ultimately it should not be charity, it should be the financing of the operations actually.
Just
I would like
just
to
a
make
small
one. Yeah, I said the one thing which we'll have to remember, that in spite of being optimist about it, the fact remains that what we have not touched upon, where the directors will be seriously concerned and affected, is the workman liability. If the workers are not paid over months, please, I tell you, all the directors have been, the IBC doesn't come into picture here. They will start taking every director will be facing a litigation for the non-payment of the wages in time. And now, as you know, the Supreme Court has already refused that MSME's application that that MHA, the Labor Ministry circular, as everybody is aware about it. So in that case, if there is going to be a default in the payment of the wages in the times to come, each and every director will be subject to all kinds of liabilities. And I think that's a point probably somebody can quickly answer whether there is any solution which government should bring about for the directors of the companies or not. It will have all the directors. There is MSME, private limited, public limited, all the companies directors, even proprietors, partners, all are included in this kind of a litigation. There is a serious, in case if it goes for another 2-3 months, already MSMEs have started stop paying the salaries of the people. So it's going to be a serious issue. It's not only about suppliers and customers anymore.
No, actually, Dushyant, in my view, you obviously cannot, in a situation like this, you obviously cannot force anything on anyone. Whatever Supreme Court might feel, if the company does not have money and money is not there because of the operations are not there, how can you you can make as many cases as you want against the directors, but will those litigation really fructify? Because see, ultimately salaries and wages will come from the operations of the company. So all said and done, the workmen, the management, they will have to sit together and find out a formula which is a workable formula. Litigation on the part of anyone is not going to help. What is going to help is how do you start the wheel rotating. So once the production starts, and I'm sure this is what is going to definitely happen, the good sense will prevail on the part of everybody. Directors also would understand, employees also would understand, and ultimately they have to come to the workable solution and not taking a position.
So here, since we are talking only about the legislation, government will have to come out with the legislation to protect the directors. My point is that I understand the spirit behind it, but if you don't have a legislation, workmen will take the existing legislation and sue the directors. That's my limited submission.
So, one thing, one suggestion I had was that, most of the time as professionals, we undermine the power of market. We always feel the solution is in the legislation. Now, in unprecedented times like this, I think they should leave it to market to really find a solution. For example, in the US, a lot of employees on a furlough. Now, when they go on furlough, companies take care of their basic benefits, their health care, the health insurance, but that is the maximum they can do. So I think if we leave it to market, we leave it to companies, company will definitely try to find a solution which does not hamper its goodwill in the long run, and also sort of caters to the stress that they're facing at home. Maybe it's a time to rethink about directors' liability, insurance liability. They could come with reinsurance for directors' liability for difficult times and charge a premium to directors, so that even if there's a case, there's a money that they're paid, they can be paid from. What I'm trying to say here that market forces should decide what is the right answer to this, more as because see, this is, I've doubt that pandemic has happened due to human intervention. I mean, we have been responsible in spreading it, but this is something which is unprecedented, and if we leave it to the market, there are a lot of novel ideas would come as a solution. So I think what we have to look not at what has happened in past, but rather look at a novel solution. Stress fund for companies. So debt with the increase of debt, the market size also will increase for debt market, right? So a new sort of products will start coming in, trade will start happening. So we should be optimistic as rightly one of the honorable panelists said, we should really be optimistic about future. And in times of such crisis, it only gives rise to new opportunities for all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you, Manoj Bhai. I think we have almost run out of all our timelines. But thank you all the panelists. This discussion has been very fruitful and very thought-provoking. I'm sure the directors who are listening to this will definitely get inspired that they just need to do the right things, and everything will settle down for a period of time. So thank you, Manoj Bhai. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sir, we have two, three questions from the audience. So can we take it, sir? Hello?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, sir, we can
Hello?
hear you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, fine. So there is a question from Mr. Bimal Bhatt. He's a chartered accountant from Baroda, I think. As a part of code of conduct and board process, can an independent director be held responsible as he has not raised any issue regarding cash flow position of company in last 2 audit committee meetings and board meeting?
If I may take that, right, I think keeping the COVID situation on the side, at least the Companies Act clearly mentions what are the safe harbor norms under Section 149 of the Companies Act, right? And it clearly says that the independent director will be liable only in respect of such acts or omission or commission by a company which had occurred with his knowledge. So first of all, whether he had a complete knowledge, which can attributable through the board process, and with his consent or connivance, or which he had not acted diligently. So I think the short answer to this point and every such question is one, whether the independent director was in knowledge of what was happening through the board process, and if the audit report or the cash flow is put in the board process, then he's in the know of it. And what a diligent person, there is enough definition and jurisprudence on what is diligent person. If he has not acted on it, then he cannot take a rescue under safe harbor provisions, and he should
Correct.
be also liable as any other director. So I think that's, I think, for want of time, that is my short answer, and then maybe we can move on.
Thank you, Vyapak bhai. See, other two questions where I had already put it on the group, but for the benefit of all, I'll read it out. Whether director of a company undergoing resolution process or under liquidation process be held liable for any undervalued, preferential, extortionate, and fraudulent transactions reported in forensic audit through statutory auditors in their report for the relevant financial year have not observed any such transactions.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. There is no doubt about it. He will be held liable. Yeah.
That's great. Then whether he is a non-executive director or an independent or otherwise should be held liable for any misappropriation or siphoning of funds, right?
In case of independent director, as Vyapak very rightly said, he can be held responsible only if it was done with his knowledge. If he can prove it that he was no party to it, it was not with his knowledge, with his understanding, then independent director cannot be held responsible in a case like this.
Right. So as it is, we are running short of time. So let us close this session over here. Before that, I have to do my duty of saying vote of thanks for all. First and foremost, thanks to all the participants who have joined in such a large number and without whom this session could not have been so successful. We are thankful to CS Ranjit Pandey for his keynote speech, which is not only enlightening but is quite useful with practical ideas. We are also thankful to CS Ashish Garg, President the ICSI, for gracing this session as chief guest and for his wonderful speech. Thankful to Mr. Sharad Abhyankar for so nicely moderating and making the deliberations really interesting, covering most of the aspects of the board and especially independent directors needs to cover in the situation as discuss arises. Thanks to all the panelists. As you all can observe, we had benefit of first 20 minutes of discourse from two dignitaries and then the panel representing lawyers, consultants, IP and valuer and academicians. And on top of it, Mr. Abhyankar's viewpoint and nicely extracting versions without restricting the discussion to Indian context only and taking it to global level. That is other jurisdictions like US, UK, Australia and Singapore. Thanks to BCCI, its managing team, its back-end support team for organizing this online fireside chat series. As you all know, there will be two more, only now one session left under this series. We are thankful to WRC of ICI for agreeing to be a joint organizer. We are thankful to CA Murtuza Kachwala, Secretary WRC, for his opening remarks and for his due support and the role he has played in putting up this series. Thank you CA Hiral Bhai Shah and Advocate Sejal bin Shah, without whom this webinar could not have been up and running so smoothly. Their technical help made all the panelists comfortable. Special thanks to Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, who guided us in selecting topics and some of the panelists and speakers. Thank you Intuit Consulting Private Limited for joining as knowledge partner. Last but not the least, Team Manoyog GRC Advisors, who has put together the entire concept, theme and the series. Tomorrow we have our fourth and the last session in the series on new norms for mergers and acquisitions as predators arise, abuse of dominance and creeping acquisitions in change dynamics. The timings are same, 5 to 6:30 p.m. You may check BCCI website for further details, or you may get mail or WhatsApp message for the registration. Thank you once again from my personal side. Thank you very much all the panelists. Thank you Sejal Ben.
Thank you. Thank
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks Hiral Bhai. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pramod Bhai, thank you. You could not be visible, but your presence was quite felt. Thank you, Pramod Bhai.